Ray, a John Maxwell certified leadership coach. Welcome to Life, Love, and Leadership, where we discuss everything pertaining to life, love, and leadership. Let's get started. Hello and welcome everyone to Life, Love, and Leadership. I'm Tom Ray, and joining with me on the line once again is my friend and co-host, Ken Shelton. Welcome.
Thanks, Tom. It's good to be with you and all of our viewers and listeners. We're glad that you tuned in today as we plan to talk about a very important subject. But we begin our podcast episodes with an attitude of gratitude, something that you hear a lot about on Thanksgiving week. It's not Thanksgiving week, but every day is Thanksgiving Day, right? So I have an attitude of gratitude summed up in a word, and that word is seedling. You know, this is the time of year when we see everything blooming, and you also can go outside and see some things that are just struggling to make it. Some make it and some don't. But there is beauty in a seedling. And here's the beauty of it. In a seedling of a flower, in that little tiny seed is all of the shape and the color and the texture like a time-release capsule that is causing that whole flower to bloom. If it's a fruit tree, every leaf on that fruit tree, every apple on that apple tree, every apple that every seed from that apple tree will produce is summed up in that one apple and in that one seed. It's amazing. It's an amazing thing that God has done. He has created the ability to be prolific in a seedling. And so I just encourage you to see yourself and your actions as seed. And you plant them with faith and watch them blossom. Tom, what's your attitude of gratitude, brother?
My attitude of gratitude is moms, specifically my mom, Juanita Ray, just such a wonderful person inside and out. And she helped frame a lot of my life in the way I am today. So hopefully she's not to blame, but she is to be praised for the person I've turned out to be. I can't begin to tell you all the things, but she's my rock star. She's my superhero for all the things that she was able to accomplish, even the later part of her life, fourth stage breast cancer, but still had this persistence to do whatever God compelled her to do. And she went on missions trips all over the world, even went to New Orleans and helped just after Katrina, and helped in soup kitchens and all those things. Meanwhile, taking chemo through it all. So she was just an example of what it means to persevere. And one day she said, "How is a cancer patient supposed to act?" So she didn't assume the position of a cancer patient. She assumed the position of a person that was full of life. So I'm thankful for her.
That.
Yeah, I'm thankful for her today. And of course, my wife too, being an awesome mother to our children, my wife, Gina. So that's my attitude of gratitude today.
All right, Tom, today we're going to be talking about a very important subject. Of course, all of our subjects we believe to be all important, or we wouldn't be taking the time to talk about them. But this one probably is the most important when it comes to our day-to-day living, in our business affairs, in our family relationships, and in our general happiness, and that is optimism. What makes an optimistic person, and how does an optimistic person sustain that attitude of possibility? Optimism, in a word, is a mindset. It's a way of thinking. It's a way of living and behaving in the world. It's a mindset that focuses specifically on positive outcomes and possibilities, thinking about what good possibilities can come in this present situation. It involves having an outlook that is also positive. In other words, we begin any venture from a position of possibility. We know that there will be opposition. That's just natural. Even Jesus said, in this world, you will have trouble, but I've overcome the world, he said. In other words, that trouble can do you no harm permanently. So we begin from a position of positivity and possibility, believing that all things will work out for the best. And so we have a number of points about optimism that we want to share with you today. That was the first one. Tom, would you like to comment on that and tell us a little bit about the second item?
Sure thing. Having a positive outlook on things. Now, there's some folks around us that say, well, why are you all positive all the time? Well, what's the sense of being negative? Negative is not going to solve any problems because negative will always get in the way of positive. But number two, optimistic people tend to be happier and more resilient in the face of adversity. They also tend to have better relationships, enjoy success in their personal and in professional lives, which is a powerful thing. So when we have an optimism, we believe that everything, as you said, Ken, just a moment ago, according to God's word, is going to work out for our good and for God's glory. And so when we're functioning and operating from that perspective, it's going to add life really to everyone around us, unless they just want to be what Eeyore from the old Winnie the Pooh.
Eeyore.
Yeah, Eeyore is always down all the time, And so do we want to be an Eeyore, right? Or do we want to be Winnie the Pooh, who's optimistic, thinks things are just going to work out?
Tom, there are what I would refer to as three reasons why people are consistently pessimistic. One of them is that it's just their go-to, their default way of behaving in the world, which usually comes by what has been modeled for them. We tend to mimic what we observe, and we idolize our parents. And so if they are negative, we will tend to approach things from a position of pessimism instead of optimism. Another reason is because of a possible chemical imbalance. You've probably heard about chemical imbalances, but in your brain are numerous chemical releases, hormones, and the chemistry of the brain is such that your body depends entirely, and your frame of mind depends entirely on the way those chemicals interact with each other and the way that they have the proper time of saturation in your brain and the way they're supposed to behave. And sometimes a person's, I want to say this clearly, and yet I don't want to be clinical. Sometimes when a neurotransmitter, actually say adrenaline or norepinephrine, is released into the brain and gives you a particular feeling of energy or positivity, or say if it's serotonin, the everything's going to be all right hormone that lets you know in this time of trouble, there's going to be a tomorrow, everything will work out. The dopamine transmitter, which basically says, wow, there was a real good payoff for that. I think I'll do it again. But for some people, that neurotransmitter also has a cellular part that wants to bring it back into itself, and that's natural. But in some instances, that serotonin or dopamine or adrenaline or norepinephrine gets sucked back up into the cell too quickly, and your brain doesn't have the opportunity to enjoy the benefit of that. Mm-hmm. And so there are a host of regulators, is what I call them. They're selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, different kinds of antidepressants, we call them, big scary word, but basically what they do in this instance is that they allow those naturally occurring chemicals to stay in place long enough for you to get the benefit. So for some people, it feels literally exhausting to be positive. It is the hardest possible thing. So visit your doctor. Talk to your doctor and say, listen, I'm having a hard time staying positive. Could it be that I have a chemical imbalance? Your doctor will take some blood samples, run some tests, have you fill out a questionnaire and discuss it, and most likely prescribe something for you that you will have to work together with your doctor on to decide if it's helping you. It may take a little time, but the end result is going to be that you will find optimism in your grasp. You will find it much more possible. And hey, it's worth it. You have a long life in front of you. Why live it on the negative? If you can fix it, you ought to fix it.
That's good. If you can fix it, you ought to fix it.
Yeah.
That's good. That's good. Well, let's jump into number 3 for optimism, right? One way to achieve an optimistic attitude is to have, as we kicked off this show today, is an attitude of gratitude. So many things we're looking for the negative. I said this morning on a leadership think tank meeting, which, by the way, you're all invited to be a part of on Monday mornings at 8 a.m. But if you're looking for worms, you'll find one under every rock. So don't look for negative things. Don't go into a conversation or into a meeting or into an interview thinking the worst is going to happen. Go in with all the right thoughts that this is going to work out for my good, and then focus on the attitude of gratitude. What things are you thankful for? Be thankful for the things you have instead of the things you don't. Be thankful for what the thing that you've been given, the different talents and abilities that you've been given, rather than the ones that you don't have, because the ones that you have are unique to you. And just like a fingerprint, you are unique, and you have a purpose on this planet to do something to glorify God and to make life simpler or easier for other people in your sphere of influence. So expressing the attitude of gratitude is powerful. Thanking people for who they are and what they mean in your life. As we kicked off, Ken and I, this morning, we shared the things that we're thankful for. So go to those people too and share with them what blessing they've been in your life. Ken?
All right. So the next thing we want to talk about is actually a teachable skill. You may not know how to do this right now, but you can learn it. And once you learn it, you can constantly go to it and reinforce this possibility. And that is the idea of reframing negative thoughts. So a very difficult situation has been presented to you by A, a person who is negative, or B, a person who wants to see you fail. There are those people in the world. And so this negative situation has been thrown at you. Now, biblically, this happened to Jesus from time to time. He was tested with certain ideas that seemed negative. You know, they brought a lady to him that had been caught in the act of adultery, which I find very suspicious. How did they catch her? Were they waiting? Was it a setup? Most likely. And why didn't they bring the man? It was just the woman. They brought her out. Jesus, the law of Moses says to stone her. What are you going to do? Jesus in that moment had to reframe the negative, which the law generally has a negative bent. So the law of Moses, that is. And so Jesus had to decide how he was going to answer that question. So to take some time, he knelt down and started drawing in the sand. I have no idea what it was that he drew in the sand, but I have a hunch that he was writing the names of the people in that circle and the sins that they had committed. And then, with those people having stones in their hands, ready to stone this woman, he said, well, which one of you has no sin? You get to cast the first stone. And one by one, they began to drop their stones. So Jesus reframed in that act, and this is very important. Reframing isn't just saying, well, how can I look at it positively? It's creating an atmosphere where positivity can grow. So all of a sudden, Jesus created a moment where people had to rethink their bias. And they dropped their stones. The only one who had the authority to throw a stone, Jesus, didn't have a stone in his hand. Mm-hmm. He refused to throw one. So he neutralized that negative possibility and made way for a positive thought. And that is, let's replace the old law with a new law. It's being fulfilled through Jesus Christ. And so we teach ourselves to do this. You're faced with a negative situation, get out a pen and a piece of paper, write it down. The thing that's presented to me, what are my 5 options? What are the possibilities? And when you do it, when you write those down, begin to think like a creator. Begin to imagine that this whole thing lies within the realm of your possibility. And as a creator, you now have the privilege of redefining the boundaries. If you study Albert Einstein, you'll find out that he was a master at bringing unlikely pairs together and watching the outcome, which, by the way, is how he developed his theory of relativity. Try to capture light in an elevator. Will it be moved? Can a shaft of light go down with the elevator? Essentially, that experiment led him to other experiments, which allowed him to focus on the idea that light can be bent. That idea of the bending of light changed the possibility. And there's no better example than light, right? Mm-hmm. So what you're doing when you're reframing a negative thought is you are bending the light in the direction of possibility and shining it on what you can do. So reframe the negative possibilities and turn them into positive possibilities.
That's good.
What you got next, Tom?
That's good. Well, I like this quote by Brian Tracy. It says, optimism is one quality more associated with success and happiness than any other. I think that can have a lot of effect on how our day will go when we have optimism. So, so as you were talking about reframing negative thoughts, and then number 5 is surrounding ourselves with positive and supportive people that can help us maintain an optimistic attitude, and seek out friends and family members who seek to encourage you. You know, we've got a lot of negative people around us sometimes. And so we don't want to be the place where we hang out all the time. We want to be around like-minded people. And when I say that, I mean people who are going to encourage us, who are going to lift us up, who are going to hold us accountable, so that we can grow in the things that has been placed in our life. And it certainly helps to have someone all the time saying, hey, we're going to make it. We're going to get through this somehow, some way. We're going to do this, or I'm praying for you, instead of, you should just go and do this, and everything negative to that situation we're going through. So surrounding ourselves with positive and supportive people can help us tremendously. Ken?
Have you ever had someone respond to your positive idea by saying, no, I'm not a pessimist, I'm a realist? I think that a realist most of the time is a dressed up pessimist. A person that puts a suit and tie on, a pessimist, and says, I think I'm a realist. Let's look at the real hard numbers. Well, sure, realism. Realism, however, is not a branch of pessimism. Realism is actually a branch of optimism. It's just like the odds against a tree that's been planted. I have in my front yard a tree that is over 30 feet tall and it's perfectly shaped. 30 years ago, one of the elders of my church called me and said, "Hey, Ken, I'm selling my 10 acres out on Hickory Ridge Road, and I have a wooded section. And if you would like to dig up a couple of trees and plant them in your yard, you have my permission." So I drove over there. I had a new house. I didn't have any landscaping. So I went over there and I found a spruce tree and a maple tree, a sugar maple tree. And I dug them both up and I put them in the back of my truck. The spruce tree was about 5.5 feet tall, and the maple tree was probably, if you consider the top branches reaching up, maybe about 6.5 feet. I planted those trees. I staked them in the fall, which meant that the very first season they had to endure was winter. If they could make it through winter, I knew they had a chance to survive in the long haul. And so the winds blew, but I had them tightly pegged to the ground. Today, you'll find only one tree in my front yard, the maple tree. It's over 30 feet tall. It's perfectly shaped. Our little subdivision has a 1/2 mile circular road, and people walk it all the time. And more times than not, people will say, "Wow, look at that perfectly shaped trees." I actually have had neighbors be jealous over my tree because theirs didn't turn out so good. Part of that was just the luck of the draw, right? But I kept with it. I fertilized it. Now, sadly, the spruce tree isn't there because I had to cut it down because it got too big.
Oh,
It just grew and grew and grew, and a competition started between the spruce tree and the maple tree. And they were growing into each other. When I planted them, even though I was optimistic, I had no idea they would grow as tall as they had and as wide as they had. Unbelievable. That pine tree was growing a foot a year.
mm.
And so I realized I had to cut it down. If you look closely, you can see the scars on my wrist because I slipped with chainsaw and almost cut my hand off. Not a good look for a musician. But, a realist, an optimist, a pessimist. So let's think for a moment about pessimism. Pessimism is looking for any opportunity to not have to show up for work. It's really the bottom line. They may act like, they're going to fulfill their obligation, but really, they talk about the boss and they talk about the crappy food and the cafeteria and their workers and their friends. I hate this job. I can't wait till I retire. They use all their sick days every year. I just think about it realistically. They join the union, nothing against unions, but they use the union to fight the management. Oh, come on, man. Is that a way to live? That kind of negativity is corrupting. If you take optimism grows more branches like a tree. And many of those branches are ways that you can be reached by someone else's optimism. You can reach others by optimism. This morning, when I got up, I took my wife to work, made myself some breakfast, and I went to my place of prayer. And I sat down and I began to pray and think. And suddenly a person came to my mind. Her name is Bonnie Faye Roden. In 1971, I graduated high school and went to college at Lee College in Cleveland, Tennessee. And within just a couple of months, actually, I was paired up because I belonged to a group, society of people. And I was paired up with Bonnie and another lady by the name of Sandra Wolf. And we were to form a trio. Well, it just clicked. It just worked. I didn't really want to be at Lee. I wanted to be away from home, but I didn't want to be at Lee because it was 700 miles from home. It was a different culture. But nonetheless, I went. Bonnie saw nothing but possibilities. And because of her optimism and potential, I decided I would stay with gospel music. And I became a songwriter. And I started making gospel albums. So today I wrote her a note and I said, I'll read it to you actually, because I think it's an important example of what I'm talking about. Here it is. Whoops, no, it's not. There it is. All right. Hi, Bonnie. Thank you for being such a sincere and authentic worshiper. When I first arrived at Lee, I struggled to find my place, but you were full of passion for the Lord, and you were willing to put legs to your ideas. By leading the way, you made it safe for me to also be myself. I'll never forget you. I thank God for you, and whatever I may accomplish in music is largely due to you. Much love, Ken. That's contagious.
Yes.
That was 1971. And here we are, 2023, 52 years later. And I can't get her off my mind. And the positive impact she made in my life. I guarantee you, if you start a journey with pessimism, people will forget you pretty quickly. But if you keep finding a way to get it done, people will never forget you.
That is so good. and that coincides with what we talked about earlier about thanking people, and letting them know the good things you have done in their life. And man, we just seem to miss it sometimes, or we forget where we come from, right? We forget that start we've had, especially in those lull times, in those seasons of not much producing, that we don't see much fruit coming from our labor. And sometimes we forget those moments, or those people along the way that spoke into our lives. And maybe that's the time where we need to draw from that well, if you will, and begin to remember that, this is only a season that we're in right now. A positive person in my life was Dr. 𝙤𝙬𝙙, right? He just had optimism, or this way about him that this is what we're going to do, and this is how it's going to happen. And I'm thinking, why would we do that? But he had this way about him that he was just, this is the way we're going to go. He made a decision. It was always one of moving forward. Good or bad, ship sinks or floats, this is the way I'm going. And so, it's powerful to have people full of optimism around you. People of faith, people who believe that even though I don't see it right now, I know that the good is going to come from it. And if we can just live life from that perspective, and just believe that everything's going to work out for our good, even if we pick up some bumps and bruises along the way, because sometimes you win, sometimes you learn. And then we're going to see great things happen as a result. So, Ken, what can people do? Let's bring this plane in for a landing. What can we do to help people discover a more optimistic point of view?
It's going to sound cliche, but here we go. Individuals who have a poor self-image are the toughest people to sell optimism to, because they believe that everybody else can do it except them. And it started at an early age. People didn't believe in you, or people over-believed in you. And when you failed, it reinforced your negative self-image. So the biggest thing that you could do for yourself, the biggest favor, the best groundwork that you could lay for the roots of optimism is to fix that negative self-image. And we do that in part by self-talk. It's okay to talk to yourself. I'll tell you what, I just want to thank the Lord for people that invented cell phones and earpieces. Because now you can talk to yourself, you can pray, you can get excited, you can cry, and people just think you're talking on your phone. Years ago, if you were going down the street talking, they were ready to bring the straitjackets out. But now it's normal behavior. I walk around my block. I keep my phone in my hand. If I'm praying, nobody bugs me. They think I'm on the phone. In fact, if they approach me, I'll point to my phone. I'm not going to tell them I'm not on my phone because I'm in a much deeper conversation. I begin to see myself the way God sees me. And God sees me as a person who is capable of doing what is placed before him. I can accomplish much more than I have accomplished, and I have a lifetime to do it. I can plug the holes in my boat, seal it up, and send it back out again. That's what life is. It's going out, finding where you're weak, coming in, fixing it, going out. You never want to retire a ship. No, sir. You keep it floating. You find ways to make it float. Winston Churchill is often seen as a very negative person because he was a bully kind of guy, and because we'll fight them in the trenches, we'll fight them on the land, we'll fight them in the sea, we'll fight them on the air, we will never give up. Because of that British, a Brit in Parliament can be very happy and sound like he wants to smack you in the face. It's just the way they're wired, Oh, I love you. Some cultures are just that way. But he actually said something about optimism. He said, you might as well be an optimist because nothing else really works. Which is one of the most pessimistic ways to talk about optimism, but it's true. You may as well be an optimist because nothing else really gets things done. So believing in yourself, talking to yourself, hanging around people who are positive, celebrating the successes that you've had, showing people those successes and watching them respond to you will help you feel better about your possibilities.
That's good. That's good. Another way, I think, Ken, you might have mentioned this earlier, but another way to form an optimistic perspective is to sit down and write things about your qualities. Also, write down the things that you're thankful for and begin to focus on those. Write down and physically write those things down so that you can see them before you. Even when you're in a bad situation, begin to write down the pros. You've heard of the pros and the cons before. Begin to write down the pros, like a list of pros. Don't even focus on the cons initially. Focus on the pros, because oftentimes we'll think about, well, it's going to take money for me to do this, so I might as well not even do it. So right there, you've killed your dream, you've killed the goal, you've killed the idea because of that one thought. But what if? So from a perspective of what if, write that down. What if it could happen? And begin to write those things down and begin to see those things. The Bible says that faith is the substance of things hoped for the evidence of things not seen. So if we can begin to write down the good things from a situation, the positive things from a situation, the pros instead of the cons. You can come to the cons later, but focus on the pros. Focus on the things that's going to elevate your spirit and encourage you as you move throughout your day. Anything else, Ken, on that topic?
One final note. I think it's very worthwhile to find someone that you admire in the field where you work, or just generally as a person, and approach them and say, I need you, and I would like to talk about that. You have some qualities that I don't seem to have the grasp on yet. And I wonder if for the next year, you would help shape me in those areas. And I'll make myself available for you to show me. I want to learn how you find resilience when you've been defeated, how you get back up again, how you remain positive when people criticize you. How do you do that? I just don't know. I've never seen it work from the inside before. I guarantee you, a real optimistic person is just waiting for somebody to ask them that question. They're ready. And God will bring those people into your life and across your path that you can go to them believing that they will respond to you. And most of the time they will. I've only found that it doesn't work when they already have too many people that have asked that question before me and they just don't have room for me. But that act of mentoring, which is really, I think the word mentoring is overused, so I try not to use it, but I like to use the word modeling. Seeing those things modeled, I can do that. I can follow that. I can repeat that and learn from a variety of people. And I have every positive and every bit of faith, every positive hope that our listeners and viewers can do that as well and can succeed, because you're going to keep on trying.
That's right.
By the way, there are cons and there are pros. And there are some cons who are pros. I just made that up. Sitting right here, I just made that up. People, this is a world of possibilities.
I love it. All right. Well, that's great. And I think that we have to set up a structure for us today to leap from an optimistic point of view and to see life from the right side up instead of the right side or the wrong side down, right? and I think that living from this perspective is really going to help our day. And you know what? Just for the next hour, be optimistic. For the next day, be optimistic. And perhaps the next week and so forth as you move along. And anytime your thoughts go into a negative place, conquer that negativity with something positive. What's a positive outlook you can have on the situation? Now, I've heard some people from the past say, well, you're just being naive. Ken, you talked about realists a little while ago. You're just being naive. Well, no, I'm just looking at it from a positive perspective. I'm going to believe that the good is going to come out of this, even if what is happening, even if the verdict that has been spoken, even if the doctor has given the prognosis, yeah, that may be a negative prognosis, but I'm going to choose to believe, not be naive, but choose to believe that something good will come out of this, that things will turn around. And I'm not saying be naive and go around and ignore things that are happening, but I am saying that if we live in this perspective, listen, so we had a family member years and years ago who was on his deathbed, and the prognosis came through, and everything lined up with the fact that he was going to pass. And so because of that, we aligned ourselves with the idea that he was going to pass. Well, why not just think for a moment that he's going to live? Because it changes our outlook on life. It changes our perspective. We're not going in and mourning someone's final moments. We're going in there celebrating life. And so I'm not saying ignore and be naive, but I am saying let's look at the positive outlook on situations and have a better thought in our life as we move forward. Anything else, Ken?
Yes, in 2 days, I will be 70 years old. I know it's hard to believe. I mean, look at me. I'm just a picture of youth. 70 years old, May 17th, 1953. My mother screamed and I was born. And here I am now. So 70 years old. My wife has lived with me for 49 years. We just celebrated our 49th wedding anniversary, May the 4th. And this is also my 50th year of ministry and my 70th year to be alive on the planet. In the Bible, the 50th year is Jubilee. Ta-da! And in the 70th year, that means completion and you get to start over again. So what I'm trying to say is I'm just a baby. Starting over again.
That's wonderful. And happy birthday to you, my friend.
Thank you.
Yes. Happy birthday. John Maxwell, he shared this. He said that, every year we celebrate someone's birthday, but they didn't really achieve all that much. They just lived another year, which is great. But he says what we should be doing is celebrating when a person achieves goals in their lives and celebrating with them on those, because then they're growing in life, not just aging, because people can stop growing and still age. But imagine if they're growing and learning at the same time. And so you have done both, my friend. And so
thank you very much, sir.
So we've got a lot to celebrate as far as that goes. And I mean, 50 years in ministry and 49 years of marriage. Woo! I've got something to strive for in my own life. Strive for you.
God's been faithful.
Wow. Amen to that. So let's wrap up real quick. Do you have anything to share with anybody of what's going on in your life, your articles or whatever?
Sure. If you want to keep up with what I'm doing, just go to KenShelton.info, KenShelton.info. And there you will find links to all the things that I am doing. My music webpage will be there. You can also find my article for Pathos. It's an online magazine. And I'm a columnist, and I have a featured article, and I also have several trending articles at this time. I've been writing about trauma and its effect on us and our life of faith and accomplishment. And so those are the big things. And, if you'll go to your favorite streaming source, whether it's Spotify or Pandora or Amazon, or maybe it's YouTube. You can do it at YouTube, or you can do it on iTunes, and just type in Ken Shelton Legacy. That's the name of my most recent album, 13 songs I wrote for my wife, my children, and my 10 grandchildren. And that's a good album, and I think you'll enjoy it. And if you don't, well, I've heard other music I haven't enjoyed, but I bet you'll enjoy this.
Make sure you go and visit his website, and it leads to all things Ken Shelton. I'd like to tell you, I mentioned it earlier in the podcast, but the Leadership Think Tank is going on every Monday at 8 a.m. It's on Zoom. So you can get to it by going to our website at realleadershipcompany.com and just click on events, and you'll see it there. And you can register for that. It's free, and you'll get the link to the Zoom meeting that happens at 8 a.m. on Monday mornings. It's a great way to kick off your week. There's no real format other than coming with something, a thought, an idea, or perhaps a struggle that you're going through, and it gets hashed out with the whole team. Even if you don't have anything to share, come anyway. You're gonna get something out of it, and it's gonna be powerful for you. So take advantage of that. Also, I offer coaching. If you're looking to maybe work on this, changing your mindset to have a more optimistic point of view, perhaps we can go through some things together through coaching. And so let me know if we can help you with that, as well as leadership development and how we can help you there. Also, I'm a realtor. So if you're looking to buy or sell a home, give me a call. So I can be reached at tom@realleadershipcompany.com or tomrearealtor@gmail.com. And certainly be looking forward to hearing from you. If you have any questions or concerns, we'd like to hear from you. We'd like to hear your attitude of gratitude. And we'd also like to hear maybe an optimistic point of view, what you've been going through, and a story about how you overcame. We'd love to hear those things, especially underdog stories. We love that. Well, that wraps us up for this time. Thank you all for joining us today on Life, Love, and Leadership.